And welcome back to the Wolverine podcast. This is John Borton. I'm here with Tom Crawford. You know him very well from his excellent work with Jack Ebling on Press Pass and from his own great videos on the Crawford Podcasting Network. Tom, welcome back.
Well, it's great to be back. It's great to have the Wolverines 5-0. So life's pretty, and the weather's beautiful outside. So, I mean, how can you beat that? The trifecta.
You got it. It is football weather. It's football excitement. Plenty of it from the Wolverines, the top 5 Wolverines, having passed the test that we talked about all summer long. You know, we went back and forth about everything that was involved in the Iowa game. I don't think Iowa was maybe team-wise up to standards that we anticipated because they've had some trouble with their offense, obviously. But the fact of the matter was, this was the first time the Wolverines had to go on the road. They met a probably better than expected opponent that first week in Maryland, and that win's going to hold up pretty well, I think. Then they go on the road and do what they need to do. Your general impressions of that Iowa win?
Well, I'm doubling down on that on your credibility in the Maryland win. As a quality win, that was indeed, and that will prove that way. I'm starting to really think that. But yeah, finally going on the road, John. We talked about it. Ohio State hadn't gone on the road yet, so 5 straight games. But it was a quality win, kind of a workman-like win. 13-0 leads are precarious leads. 20-7 leads are precarious. You're 2 scores from being down, but they hung tough, and it got a little dicey, as you knew it would be. It always is at Kinnick, no matter how comfy a 20-0 lead looks at one time. You knew that I would fight back, and Michigan got conservative. I mean, they had the 3 straight 3-and-outs, the latter part of the third into the fourth, and then the JJ getting hit and the ball goes backwards, and all of a sudden the field got flipped, and I was back in it, so to speak. So, but a huge win for Michigan. A quality win. And they're in great shape right now.
There's no doubt about it. Here's a couple things that I look at when you're talking about that game. What did they want to do? Get off to a good start in each half. So they, in the first quarter, as that game opened, they take the ball and they drive right down the field, 75 yards for a touchdown. Very methodical, very workmanlike. And then they get the 3-and-out on defense. Coming out of the halftime, They get the 3-and-out, they get the stop on Iowa, and they take it right back down for another touchdown. You can't open 2 halves better than that, especially when you're on the road in as tough a place as you are at Iowa.
Well stated, John. The thing about it is when you're receiving the opening kickoff in a hostile environment, that's that's kind of a tough spot to be in, because the crowd's all jacked up and it's easier to get lathered up on defense for the home team than it is the offense, actually. But Michigan just took it to them, and then the Ronnie Bell sweep and Scooney on that block and CJ on that block. I mean, it just shows you how fine-tuned that offense was on that first drive. It was very precise drive, and that crowd just went away instantly.
We came into this, or at least I came into this, and some people that I respect greatly, basically with the mindset of, okay, the only way Iowa wins this game is you help them win this game. You set them up. You give them short fields. You turn it over. You allow the defense to score points, which it did, outscoring the offense the week before. And you could tell Michigan wasn't interested in that. Michigan was determined not to be helpful at all to the Hawkeyes. And thus we talk about workmanlike. You mentioned conservative when they got up 20-0. I think you're protecting a lead there. So I get that a little bit. One of the things that bothered me, I guess, a little in the fan or fringe media analysis was, okay, now you've got a fourth quarter where you played not to lose. I'm thinking, no, you played to win in the situation that you were in. Having that three-score lead at Iowa, protecting the ball and not getting crazy with it. And really the only time that Iowa scored with Michigan's first string defense on the field came when you gave them the short field.
Yeah.
J.J. McCarthy gets under pressure, tries to get rid of it, but fumbles it backwards. Then you get the short punt, and then boom, Iowa takes it in. That's the only time Iowa scored against all of Michigan's ones. And I think it just underscores what we were saying. I reject the playing not to lose business. You can say you got a little conservative, and that's probably what you wanted to do. And there were moments where it was a little bit they drove it down a couple times. Once that home crowd is given any sort of hope at all, and they were after that short field touchdown, then that place whips up into a frenzy, and I think it pumped up Iowa, and they were able to move the ball a little bit. But I don't know how you feel about the whole playing not to lose business, but I reject that level of criticism of the offense out of hand.
Yeah, playing not to lose is a little over the top, but and Kinnick, you're right. Kinnick is crowd wise is the most resilient crowd of hanging in there when your team is down of any stadium in the Big Ten, in my opinion. Some stadiums just completely go away, verbally, and they hung in there and waiting for a little clasp of life, and they got it with the short field, and we knew that was the only way that Iowa was going to score. Although there were moments in when I was moving the ball that Junior Colson, guarding, covering the tight end, there's some little things you could pick at, okay, as far as
absolutely,
as far as they could have done, but which is great. What you want to have. You don't want to have it so they're flawless and then they kind of get full of themselves. I mean, there's plenty of teaching on the film this week, I'm sure, by Jim Harbaugh and his staff. So that little bothered me a little bit, but I tell you what, though, you're right. Just when you play it conservatively offensively, let's just say, use your term, conservatively, you're allowing your defense to win the game, and the defense won the game with those two stops. And when you think about the one that held them on downs, and Rod Moore had a couple of big time stops. You remember those by Rod Moore. And then the last stop, and we're going to talk about the ends in a second here. You're going to address that of some big play on Michigan's D line came up big. So yeah, you want to put it in the hands of your defense in that situation, and the defense came through.
Yeah, the defense came through, and the offense gave a little breathing room when it needed to as well.
Yes.
I mean, you don't want to stop scoring altogether, especially when Iowa starts to get it rolling. But you do not, you do not want to go on the road and give Iowa short field opportunities. And they avoided that all game long, except for once, and that's when Iowa cashed in. So I think, all in all, if you look at this, a really, really strong
Well, John, I think
outing.
let me one more ingredient on fan reaction, and I go back to last year on this when Michigan hit Sainristil and they went up 30-14 against Michigan State. Okay, they got a little conservative.
Mm-hmm.
They let Michigan State back in the game. I mean, that's an example of where it can go against you a little bit, as opposed to putting your foot on the throat kind of deal. Because everything was open. I mean, Michigan State could not cover Michigan's receivers at that stage of the game, and they showed no indication. And all of a sudden, Michigan backed off.
Okay, but I get you, and I see where you're coming from, and a lot of people are going to agree with you, and I do partially. But there was no Kenneth Walker over on Iowa's.
No, I get it. Yep.
I mean, Kenneth Walker tore Michigan apart last year, and Iowa collectively had 35 yards rushing. So I do think those are a little bit different situations, but I hear you. You get a lead, you want to keep building that lead, and so you wished you were facing the Michigan State offense and defense from this year last year. But
Later on, we
that's
got that
another
little
story.
in a few weeks. Yeah, we'll wait for a few weeks on that one.
Yeah, another story for another day. Um, you talked about the defense stepping up at the end, and it was very, very obvious when all of a sudden Mike Morris is getting pressure on every single play and gets 2 sacks, and Eyabi comes in and puts the big heat on as well. We have talked all year about, okay, you're just adding pieces. You're adding pieces to this pass rush, and that was a big question mark. I think we modify our thinking right along, but if you look back, one of the big things before the season started was, how do you ever replace the kind of pressure that Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo brought? They're getting it in waves. I'm telling you, they've had 5 or 6 guys come through and put heat on quarterbacks, and certainly what these two did in this game was a reminder that they've still got some parts.
Yeah, and Okie, this is a kid that transferred from Alabama via Memphis and wherever. Raw talent, and it seems like he's really fit in to this team. And I mean, you were at the game. I was not at the game. I saw the post game. I'm via TV. I'm seeing JJ McCarthy come into this interview when those two young men are being interviewed, jumping in and just going on and on and on about he's being the ultimate team guy. These two guys won a game. The defense won a game. They're making the plays, and that's what you want to get out of your quarterback. And Mike Moore, and then Harbaugh jumps in. I mean, these post game interviews are getting pretty hilarious. Harbaugh's jumping in. He's calling Mike Morris 6'7", 290. I think he's like 6'5", 260. But anyway, might as well embellish. I mean, the dude came up big. He came up huge in this game, and man, he has showed speed. You've seen him drag down people in every game, all 5 games now. Mike Morris' foot speed has been showcased, and when you get into the tougher competition coming up, that's really going to be needed, John.
Yeah, someone I respect a great deal said Michigan is becoming edge rusher you, and
that's good. I like that.
I tell you what, there's something to that. You put Chase Winovich into the NFL, and Rashawn Gary, they moved him around, and man, is he tearing it up now.
He's ripping up the league right now. Every play. It's
but
crazy.
It's there were people that thought, does it end with Hutch and Ojabo, and all of a sudden look at this. I mean, and I think Jim Harbaugh kind of called his own shot there, because he said, sometimes these no-name defenses, you got like a year ago, nobody knew who David Ojabo was, and you might find some guys. Well, they're finding some guys, and they're crafting some guys.
Yeah, they have. And I mean, you're seeing, you made a good point about, it's just not a 1 or 2 name, household name team that everybody's making the plays and everybody's getting featured on BTN and Fox and everything like that. These are multiple guys that are coming up big for Michigan on both sides of the ball. And that's a complete team. That's what Ohio State is. They're a complete team. Penn State is that way as well, where you're getting contributions both sides of the ball, multiple people on both sides of the ball. Michigan epitomized that as good as anybody.
When you are talking about complete, I think we're seeing a complete back in the Michigan backfield in one Blake Corum. It's just answer this, answer that, answer this. You saw, if you watch The Journey, they did a great little piece on him and all his work ethic that he learned from his father in the landscaping business. Well, he's a blue collar worker out on the field, and he just keeps showing different parts of his game. A week ago, you heard Harbaugh talking about his ability to get within the breathing room of a defender and make a great cut. And I think a couple of things that had people saying, well, can he be an every down back? Can he be the guy that gets short yardage for you? I'm telling you, I think it's not that he's unstoppable, but he has fantastic strength, and he can make the tough yards when he's called upon to do that. You see his stats there: 29 carries after a 30 carry week the week before, 133 yards, 1 touchdown, and busting that long touchdown towards the end. I'm just more and more impressed by young Mr. Corum.
Blake Corum smiles a lot, and he's in front of our media press, after the game a lot. Last year, this year, but he was never smiling more than after that Maryland game. If you remember, he couldn't stop smiling, and it was because he got to carry the ball 30 times. I mean, he's embracing this. It's like, and that, he's got to sit in a cold tub after that, I'm sure, but it doesn't bother him. He's all purpose, every down back, like you said. I know that's not chic these days. You need by committee or whatever, but Michigan's going old school with Blake Corum, and Donovan Edwards is back now. So it was great to see him back. And he carried the ball 5 times, and he got almost 6 yards of carry.
Hmm.
And he's going to get back in the groove. And then
Yes.
look at the dimension that he brings as a receiver. By the way, that broken play sprint out by JJ was as good as it gets, and that throw to Donovan Edwards for that touchdown. So
No
you're
doubt.
getting you're getting Donovan Edwards contributing in a different way than Blake Corum. That's a great combo between the two. But have Blake do most of the heavy lifting, and he looks like he's been heavy lifting. This is a massive dude at 5'8", 210 pounds. He looks like he's like 250.
Yeah, he is such a weight room warrior. We have
Yeah,
seen it. We've seen it. Him tweet about it. We've seen him in those videos that Michigan shows. We saw it on the journey when he's working overtime. We heard Jim Harbaugh last week saying that here's a kid that could play the noon game and then play the 3:30 game. I thought
that's
that
good.
was just excellent. And also, you saw once again how versatile he is, how elusive he can be for somebody that is as put together as he is. I mean, he's for 5'8", he's got some pounds on him, and he's got some just thickness to him. And yet, they give him a hole towards the end of that game, and he's one on one against an all Big Ten linebacker and somebody that was a preseason All American,
Yeah.
and boom, he doesn't get touched. He leaves him in the dust.
Yeah, he's got that shimmy thing going. He's got that down to a sign. When you can do that with that kind of power, and then back where he's, in the A and B gap going through, on 3rd and 2, and he's piles getting moved, and it's not taking linemen pushing from behind. He's doing it with his leg. He's got massive legs. I mean, as big as his arms are, his legs are. It's crazy. He's got a freakish body. I swear to God. But that's what's going to take. And when you get into Big Ten play, and especially against a tougher defensive team, there's going to be some tough front sevens. But let me tell you something. Iowa's got as tough front seven as you can get, and he didn't
Right.
bat an eye. And so I was thrilled with his performance.
Great point you made as well about bringing Donovan Edwards into the picture, him getting healthy enough to play again, and there couldn't have been a better time for him to be out there. I mean, that rollout and connection for the touchdown looked like something that those two probably did after games last year. We know that they worked out together along with Andrell Anthony, and these guys are pretty tight, and it was a perfect time. They need a second back. They need a third back. You can get plenty out of Blake Corum, no doubt about it. But boy, I'll tell you what, the more depth that you can have. Mentioning how specialized different backs are these days. I still go back to Fred Jackson, and he would be asked, "Well, you subbing in at this time or this time," and he says, the best thing in the world is if you don't have to. You have the guy that can do everything at such a high level. Blake Corum is becoming that. Mike Hart was that. Somebody that could just stonewall somebody in pass protection. Blake Corum will stick his nose in that department as well. One thing about this game, I noticed that CJ Stokes did not touch the football,
Notice
has
that.
not
Yeah.
since that fumble, and
Right.
I guess the lesson continues. Or you know, you, that again, that's a game where you don't want to take any
Yeah.
chances.
No, you're right. I mean, that's going to bed, no dinner for you tonight. I mean, twice. I mean, but you know what? I get that. And obviously a lot of these decisions on playing time during on Saturdays revolves around what happens during the week. As
Mhm.
far as ball preservation,
Yeah,
taking care of the football, and if
great
he
point.
fucked up in practice, I mean, he's not gonna play. And
Yeah,
that's a wise decision. I mean, you look at those big, look at Michigan's backs have had huge games. It's with a lot of carries. Tamunka Batuka, in particular in the Ohio State game in '95. I mean, he lugged it a ton of times. He got stronger as it went on. Like Jim Brown, old man alert here. Jim Brown would get with the Cleveland Browns would get tougher as the game went on. Blake
yeah.
Corum is the same way. I think, plus of all, he's hard to find
Oh yeah.
behind Michigan's pretty tall linemen. So that can be an advantage too. That 5'8" thing can work to your advantage as well.
That's a little Jamie Morris, Mike
Yeah,
Hart injected into there, because exactly, he is not only tough to find, but a great point. As a defense starts to wear down, he does not seem to. He can still pop the big run later in the game, and that's And as for CJ Stokes, just to get back to him at some for a minute, someday he will be like status wise or eligibility wise right where Blake Corum is now. He'll be that junior. And you know, this lesson learned in his freshman year and how it's being emphasized, I think will stick with him and really help him, because I think this guy is going to be he's going to be excellent down the road.
well, you look at Michigan's two back sets. When you had a Tyrone Wheatley and a Ricky Powers, you had kind of different style. You had different combinations of
Mhm.
backs, and that can throw the defense off, kind of out of sync with a different style of back as far as having to, um, you know, tackle that guy and just and find him and catch him. And so later on, that will be maybe there can be a game where he can, maybe it's Indiana. I mean, if Michigan gets ahead, get him some carries in that game and get his rhythm back. And but you're right, all of a sudden that fumble against Maryland, man, it's like, okay, son, sideline.
Yeah. And you mentioned Indiana. When we turn now the focus from last week to what's ahead, and that is the Indiana Hoosiers, who have not been very scary. They've had big fights on their hands throughout, and for a while there, the Hoosiers were giving Michigan fits in their own ball yard. Uh, Not saying it can't still happen, but this looks like, on the surface, a more manageable game. Um, hey, I'll get a quick other plug. The Buckeye fan just weighed in and said that Blake Corum is a beast, and I'm a Buckeye fan. So,
Oh, that's good.
that's
That's good ability. Yeah.
he says he's worried about that last game. Well, there you go. From Frank Carone, you've got to acknowledge that Michigan has to take care of all the other games ahead right now and not look down the road. Not look down the road to Penn State a week down the road. Not look at all at Ohio State at this point, other than maybe you have that 1-2 plays in practice that you're working on, and that working on Ohio State every day kind of feeling. But your focus has to be on getting done what's right ahead of you, and that's Indiana. It was mentioned to Jim Harbaugh on Monday. Could this be a trap game? And it was mentioned to one of the other players. I think it was Mozzie Smith, and they keep going back to nameless, faceless opponents. It doesn't matter. We don't see team. We don't see anybody else and anything else. We just see another foe that we have to maximize our talent and make them go down. Your thoughts
Yeah,
approaching this one?
yeah. I go. We know the history of Indiana. Jim Harbaugh, 2015, wasn't that overtime? I mean, that 15 team would end up being a pretty good team for Michigan. And I think a couple of years later when they went down there, Michigan pulled one out at the end. And Bloomington's, tough for Michigan, at least with Jim Harbaugh's, has been coaching and in the past. But those teams that have beaten or not beaten, but hung with Michigan in the past, a little bit more talent offensively than this team is. Just more balance. Look at last year's Indiana team. They didn't win a Big Ten game, so it's not like they were that good last year. But they didn't play them in Bloomington. But I mean, it's concern for this reason, John. And I probably do too many parallels with last year. But you remember they played the first 4 games at home, and then they went on the road, and they got that quality win at Wisconsin. Okay, man, we got this road thing. We got this thing nailed on. What do they do the following week? They go to Lincoln, Nebraska, and have an absolute root canal game.
Yeah.
That everybody was pulling their hair out by the time that was a painful win.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just to go through that game was painful. Okay, and Nebraska's the same caliber opponent. Let's be real, than Indiana. Maybe a little bit tougher place to play, but that's why this is why you concern yourself, and Michigan will be focused on that. Don't give them any hint that they're going to hang around and end up on Sports Center that night as the upset of the week.
And I think it's a big difference from Iowa, not only in that it's not their first Big Ten road game or road game period this year, but also Indiana presents a different defense than Iowa. You had to, I mean, you surely did not want to give the Iowa team with a poor offense and a stout defense opportunities because of your own mistakes. Do you open it up a little bit more against the Hoosiers because they are dead last in the Big Ten in giving up passing yards? And as a matter of fact, in the next out of the next 4 games Michigan plays, I think they've got or 3 games, they've got 3 out of the top 4 teams for yielding pass yardage.
What was the old saying? What you want to do when you take on an opponent, you want to exploit their weaknesses, and that's a weakness for Indiana. And with Jay, a big fan of JJ McCarthy as I am, his vertical passing game, although it was a heck of a throw he threw to Andrell. His best throws, have you noticed to Andrell Anthony, like Michigan State last year? I mean, he's got those two got a good chemistry going on. That's going to be a long-term combination. But I'd love to see the vertical game deeper and where JJ is a little bit more precise in that. I mean, he's got the flats down there and the tight end throws, he's got those pretty much down. But the deep throws, he's going to need to stretch those defenses. This is a perfect opportunity to fine-tune that scheme, that strategy of stretching that defense. The weather's supposed to be dry on Saturday. I really would like Michigan to go a little bit more vertical, like all fans do. Go vertical, throw it deep, and see what he can do in that type of aerial attack.
Count 22 saying JJ has a huge breakout game. I think this would be a perfect opportunity. And as you are completely on point in mentioning, it would be a great time to work out that long ball 5-6 times during this game. Let it loose. John Stoops says if JJ, if they let him throw, he throws for 300 against Indiana. I think that's on the mark. Meanwhile, AJ Cavanaugh weighed in from our listening audience and said, I've seen too many Michigan Hoosiers games to write off Indiana. I think that is, in the last few years, to know they cannot write the Hoosiers off. I think that's true, but it is still a game where Indiana's weakness could really abound to one of Michigan's potential strengths, and that is having JJ McCarthy fully unleashed to throw the ball around. And I think Michigan's defense is good enough in this one where it could cover some mistakes. But you'd really like to see that long ball developed in this game.
Well, and you want to jump on them. You want to jump on Indiana quick. I mean, I want to be on. Indiana's a basketball school, right? But when Indiana sees, hey, 5 Power 5 coaches have been fired, how about Tom Allen? Maybe we got to get rid of that guy. If they get blown out in this game, I mean, Indiana are going to start questioning Tom Allen. I mean, you want to get the crowd in a negative mentality and hopefully get them to leave so you can take over the stadium. Michigan will have good representation down there. They always do. It's not a bad drive to Bloomington. So it's not quite like Ohio State goes down there, but this is a game you really jump on them just like you did in Iowa. Jump on them quick and just nullify any fantasies out there that their fans have, and they have, more importantly, the players of Indiana, that they're going to hang around this game, make this a competitive game.
Somebody asked me today, do you expect the Hoosiers to pack it out on Saturday? And I said, well, I'm not sure. I haven't checked to see if they've got a basketball scrimmage. I mean,
That's true.
You've got Assembly Hall right beyond where we can see in the stadium, and they, along with maybe another Big Ten team, but that's again a story for another day.
Yeah,
might be waiting for the basketball season to roll around. Anyway, let's talk about concerns heading into. I mean, you get this one in. You're at the midway point of the regular season. How fast is that gone? What, Tom Crawford, as you look at this Michigan team, what are your biggest concerns finishing off the first half and knowing what's ahead in the back half?
Well, I'm telling you what, this Colasar injury really disappoints me. I'm Caden Colasar didn't Ballas report that, or one of you two reported that he's out for a while? Did I hear that?
I haven't. Chris may have had something on that. I haven't seen anything definitive.
Okay.
We certainly haven't had any confirmation.
Okay. But if he's hurt, I mean, that guy is – I'm a big special team guy. I always have been. And back to another 35, Dieter Herron back on Harbaugh and Colasar, older Colasar's team. He was number 35, just like him, and another guy named Donnie Dufek when he played special teams and obviously started. Special team guys are big with me, and this guy, if it is that Colasar is out, that would hurt Michigan because I look at all phases of the game. But back on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, I love the offensive line, but I'm a little concerned about, I'm going to pick at things. We all do, about Michigan covering the tight end after what happened at Iowa. That seemed like Michigan's secondary, maybe, and linebacking core, between the two of the second and third levels. Pass coverage looked a little bit suspect at times in this game, and Iowa's not a juggernaut offensively. You're telling me in that last possession that Michigan was up, that they had all their backups in? Was that true?
Because, no, man, I didn't say all, but they did not have all their ones in.
But I didn't. That bothered me. I mean, if you're gonna say what bothers me, that bothers me. I don't want to, even there's a minute to go. I mean, they waltzed down the field like Grant took Richmond. So I mean, I guess I'm defensively against really good offensive teams. But there's one down, the school down, south in the last game of the year is gonna with balance, and Penn State has that balance. Michigan's defense against balanced attacks. That's Penn State, and that's Ohio State. That concerns me of how they're going to deal, and they're dealing with play action and covering guys, and mainly from an aerial standpoint through the air.
Yeah, well, and I'm 100% with you on that. You watch that last series, and you think, oh man, if even with some subs in. If Iowa can do that, what is Ohio State going to do? And that's a legitimate concern. You need to. You're a little thin, I think, at this point in the linebacking core. You got to get guys back, and you've got to get some of the guys that you have taking that step up and getting better at that throughout the season. You mentioned Colasar. I think about the fact that Michigan could have two All-American tight ends on the field right now. Luke Schoonmaker is tearing it up, but Eric All, we haven't seen him for a couple of games.
Yeah.
Jim Harbaugh shuts down all conversation when it comes to injuries. So, you don't know what you've got there. So I think that speaks to, okay, let's talk about depth. When Donovan Edwards was out, it was the Blake Corum show. You need to keep those two guys healthy for absolutely sure, and you are still don't have your top two quarterbacks. So I just think those depth issues could be a concern going down the road.
It's a game of attrition. You're absolutely right. And Colazar, if he is hurt, I mean, he's depth at safety. I mean, he plays. He's in there at certain times, and you want as many healthy players as possible. And so injuries are an issue. I know when you bring them up in the press conference, I mean, you don't get abrasive responses from Jim Harbaugh. You just get stoic, short answers working through something.
Yep.
And it's just like that. You know how it is.
Yep.
I mean, you've been down that path for so many years with a variety of coaches, including Lloyd Carr. So that's just what we I guess we find out. We'll find out when at noon on Saturday in Bloomington who's out there, who's not.
Yep. Shadyville 03 weighs in. I'm worried about the run defense against the competent rushing attack like Penn State. I think that's reasonable, but I also think that with the staunchness that this defensive line is gaining and the confidence, I think that they're growing. And we had another listener weigh in talking about the slow burn that Michigan's doing, getting a little bit better every game. Sarah Darby says getting better each week and winning each game in front of them. That's what you've got to do, but you've got to get better along with it because you've got that huge one at the end.
Yeah, hey, and you got to, and then that decision about opening the playbook. I mean, how much do you want to open up? How much do you want to save? I mean, you're going to need some creative play against Penn State. I will say this though, on that Penn State versus Ohio State, I taped the Ohio State Northwestern game, DVR'd it, and watched it later, Penn State Northwestern game, and wow, they just play their level of their opponent. They are a weird team in some regards. I mean, they're not a juggernaut. There is a huge difference, in my opinion, between Penn State and then the Michigan-Ohio State tier.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, and I've seen Penn State play a number, including the whole game against Central Michigan. They don't scare the heck out of me, but they're a good team, and you don't take anything for granted. That's a huge game.
Absolutely. Take them one at a time. And if you're talking about who's good and who's not, who the heck comes out of the Big Ten West? I call it the Wild Wild West because we just had a coach fired that went 9-4 last year, and Paul Chryst. Yeah. Everybody starts talking, Minnesota. Nobody's going to touch Minnesota, and they turn around and lay an egg. I picked Purdue in the early part of the season, and then you saw them, lose right away, and you're thinking, well, okay, that was kind of a dumb pick, but then they win a big one, and I don't know who in Tom Crawford's mind, as we wrap this thing up, comes out of the West.
Well, John, let's go back to Minnesota for a second. I mean, they haven't beaten anybody. They had 3 cream puffs, and then they played another cream puff in Michigan State. So where's their quality win? I mean, come on. I think Michigan's had a soft schedule. I mean, Michigan's schedule is tougher than Minnesota's, but that's just the way it is. And watch, Purdue, I had a feeling that Purdue, Minnesota was going to get caught up in this whole thing. And they had homecoming and it was kumbaya, all of a sudden they get beat. And Mo Ibrahim, him not playing, I mean, that has a lot to do with it. Illinois' defense is for real. That Brett Bielema has done a great job there. Got a great DC. I really think that, they could test Michigan's offense and you know that you're talking about an ultimate trap game. How about the game right before Ohio State?
Yeah.
Michigan, you know, and once again, well, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but that schedule moving forward for Michigan, every game we are literally as fans going to have to take them in one at a time because there's a lot of potholes up ahead, including Illinois, which, you know, as we sit today, could end up in Indianapolis as good as anybody.
Wow. Who would have thought that before the start of the season? But I'll tell you what, taking them one at a time, we're looking at Bloomington and heading south to Indiana on the weekend. Tom Crawford, as always, fantastic job. I appreciate you so much. We have often said we could do this all night because it's just talking about a subject that a lot of people are intensely interested in. We thank you all for listening in on the Wolverine podcast live edition, and we will catch you next week.
We're looking forward.